So today I'm joined by Yvonne Kampens from the OA Switchboard, also Eva van Rijn from the University of Groningen, and Laura Bredal from the University of Waterloo. So thank you all very much for your time and for being here today. And before we begin the session, we would love also to learn a bit more about your institution metadata practices. So all of you in the audience, please take a few minutes to answer this poll, and we will share the results while we are getting through the session. So I think we shall wait a couple of minutes. While you're answering the questions, probably the majority of you are already familiar with ORCID, and this is also why you're here. But I would like to mention a couple of things about ORCID and also the reason why we're doing this series around research integrity. As you know, ORCID is the organization behind the ORCID ID, the unique and persistent identifier for researchers. And this ORCID ID is accompanied by the ORCID record, where researchers and organizations can include metadata that represents the entire career of a researcher or a person related to research. This can go from their employment, education, publication activities, outputs in general, peer review, research resources, funding, etc. And also the set of APIs that are going to allow organizations to exchange data in the different sections. And the two organizations that we have here with us, both the University of Groningen and the University of Waterloo, are using the API in one way or another to exchange those metadata. And this is also a sign that ORCID is in the center of what we call the community trust network. So at the end, it's a piece in enhancing trust and trustworthiness in the scholarly record. And depending on the progress and time that record has been there and the interaction the record has gotten, then the higher will be the level of trust markers and data that is added to that. So with that, again, I would like to thank everybody from being here. And Yvonne, the floor and the word goes over to you.
Thank you, Paloma. Welcome to everybody, and I'm really honored and happy to be the co-host of this second session we're organizing with ORCID around research integrity and the importance of metadata. And we work closely with our fellow open infrastructure initiatives. I think in the waiting room before entering the webinar, you've been shown a little video animation that we've done together with ORCID and Crossref and ROAR. About the importance of how it all links up and connects. And building on that today, we'll talk about best practices on the institutional side. Little introduction on the OA Switchboard and why we care so much, or maybe why we've learned so much about metadata and metadata quality. OA Switchboard is a simple shared infrastructure for the global exchange of metadata. We're independent, not-for-profit, and community-led. And it's built by and for the people who use it and is leveraged with existing PIDs such as ORCID, ROAR, and DOIs. And over the years, we've been around 6 or 7 years, we have gained tremendous adoption and traffic, and we gained important insights, which we're building on today through the Switchboard. 3.2 million, what we call messages, sets of metadata have been exchanged by 47 publishers participating. Now, further to the OA Switchboard itself, a couple of years ago, together with the community around the Switchboard, we started the data quality initiative, the data quality challenge. And it's building on our community-wide lessons learned and best practices, and it's based on our core values of trust, collaboration, and efficiency. And this leads nicely. I will summarize some of our findings, and I really look forward hearing from Eva and Laura on specifically how they do it and which ones have really helped them the most. The consequences of poor metadata practices are significant. fragmented institutional reporting, operational inefficiencies, reduced visibility of research outputs, and increasing difficulty participating effectively in the open research ecosystem. And at the same time, those institutions that invest in metadata quality are better positioned to support research integrity, improve discoverability, streamline workflows, and strengthen their role within open scholarly communications. Now, what can institutions do to improve metadata quality? And several best practices that have come out of our data quality challenge, just a few. It sounds really basic, but first and foremost, ensure that your organization has a ROR identifier and that it's consistently used across systems and workflows. Keep your ROR record up to date and complete, especially if you're from a non-English speaking country. Abbreviations, acronyms, synonyms in local language are incredibly important to be added to the ROR record as our local language naming conventions. Encouraging your researchers to maintain a single ORCID and use it consistently when applying for grants, submitting manuscripts, and engaging with publishers and funders, and supporting researchers by updating and enriching their ORCID records. And treat, last but not least, metadata quality as a continuous improvement process. For instance, one amongst is the always switch work not for me functionality, where you can actually give direct feedback to the publishers as well as the ROR registry in case something didn't resolve correctly. And with that, I would like to hand over to our first speaker and hear from University of Groningen. Eva, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Paloma and Yvonne, for the introduction and the welcome. Let me share my presentation. If you could please confirm you can see my screen. Yes, okay, thank you. So today I want to share with you some best practices that we have put into place at the University of Groningen to improve and maintain our research metadata quality. I want to start with introducing myself and our organization, and then I'll take you through some solutions that we have put into place that we have developed or are still developing to improve research metadata. And I will show two examples to you. And the first one is what we could maybe call more of an upstream solution. So something that we do at the beginning of the publication process before an article even reaches the publisher. But I also want to share with you a solution that we have further along in the process after research has been published. So how we can improve metadata without hours of manual effort from our colleagues. So to introduce myself, I'm Eva van Rijn. I work at the University of Groningen, a Dutch university in the north of the Netherlands, more specifically at the University Library. And I'm a research intelligence specialist and also the product owner of our Fair Research Intelligence Dashboard. And that is a product that came out of a project we started a little over 2 years ago, where we developed a research data warehouse that contains information about UG research from different sources, such as Pure, Scopus, and Cyvel, information related to research input, output, and impact. And on top of that, we've built dashboards that provide insights about our research to, for example, policymakers, research support, and management staff. To introduce our university, some facts and figures, we have 11 faculties and 3 supporting services. In 2025, we had over 32,000 students, over 4,000 FTE of academic staff, so that includes research as well as teaching staff. And together they produced over 9,000 scientific publications. That's around an average number for a university. And one thing that I want to mention is that for peer-reviewed articles, we also reached 97% of open access publications. So what we obviously want is that for these publications to be as findable as possible, that they can create impact and that they can be well recognized as belonging to UG researchers and to our organizations. So I want to take you through some Organization and infrastructure steps that we have put into place to achieve this goal. So we support our researchers with publishing that's done at the faculties, but we also provide support, for example, through our Digital Competence Center. So they help with publishing data sets and software, for example, because there are specific metadata requirements for those types of output. We provide specific open access publishing support. And then at the end of the research lifecycle, we also want to ensure we have a good repository of all the research output that we have produced. Our research information system for that is PURE. Our goal or our purpose for this is to have a registry of all UG research output. We want to have very rich and high quality metadata for it. And we use it for different purposes. We want for our researchers, but also for us as an organization to showcase our research output. We want to report on research for quality evaluation, so that's simply a requirement that is asked of us to do. We also want to use this data to support strategic decision-making surrounding research. Other than having good infrastructure into place, we feel like people support is also very important. So we have a pure support team that helps researchers with ensuring that the research is properly administrated in this system. And we have a validation team that checks the metadata quality, completes it if necessary, and assures that guidelines that we have for this are maintained. And another thing we have put into place is that we encourage the use of persistent identifiers as much as possible. So we use ORCIDs for researches. Obviously, we have DOIs and handles for publications. We use, amongst other things, ROR ID for organizations. So that's something that we find very important. So as I said, there are some solutions that we put into place, and the first one that I want to mention is the upstream solutions. And that is we encourage existing and new research staff to register an ORCID in our system. We provide support on it, so we explain how it can help them. We also help them if they have questions. We have frequently asked questions, but we also have a team that can answer more in-depth questions. And we explain the advantages of connecting an ORCID to, for example, Pure and Scopus ID, because we have seen that it boosts findability. We also have an active connection between Pure and ORCID, so researchers can export their research and the associated metadata between the two systems. And there are some challenges here. One is that ORCID is not always included by publisher either. The publisher does not have a field to register it, or platforms that may use a different ID for an author, for example. Not all researchers have an ORCID. We see that coverage is better for more recent hires. That is because we are putting more emphasis on it in recent years, and we have more support for it. And we also see that it can vary across disciplines. So some disciplines have a very high coverage of ORCID registration, and other disciplines that have a different publication culture, for example, may have smaller percentages of coverage. Another challenge is that there are some differences in provided metadata between Pure and ORCID. So it's not always possible to do a full one-on-one copy between the two systems. And then for the solution further on in the research process, there is an example I want to share with you, and that is the metadata on researcher affiliations. This is data that we use to support strategic decision-making, so we need quite detailed insights into our research. Collaborating is one of the important strategic goals that we have. So, for example, we want to show how we collaborated on an international or national level, how we have collaborated between sectors and disciplines, for example. But what we are seeing, however, is that there is a lot of ambiguity in data about external organization. A single organization may be in the system with different spelling and language variants, abbreviations, yes or no, and persistent identifiers are often missing. And that makes it sometimes difficult to have good quality reporting on collaboration with external organizations. What we are doing to improve this is that we have taken a route through our research data warehouse. In our research data warehouse, we already hold data from different sources about research outputs. So we have Pure data, Scopus data, OpenAlex, and we have ROR. And from that, we have created a matching logic. It's based mostly on a DOI and author matching. And that helps us automatically enrich and clean a pure record in the data warehouse. So a single record can then be deduplicated and cleaned using the data from the other sources. And we can use the ROR ID to disambiguate the organization and to allow for more in-depth reporting on collaborations. And the next step we want to do is also include this logic for new publications coming in. So this cleaning step is already done before it is entered into our research information system. And then, as Yvonne also said, we see a need to have continued effort on this. We want to continue our efforts to encourage use of persistent identifiers, so we can use these persistent identifiers to connect information sources in a reliable way. We will continue monitoring of data quality. If we are seeing any trends in, for example, completeness or variance in metadata, we can determine possible action points that we need to do in order to improve this. And we want to continue having conversations with publishers, and we don't do that alone. We do that together with our the other Dutch universities to address the metadata expectations that we have for this. So the conclusion would be that indeed it's important to have a continued effort to keep metadata aligned with standards and needs. And that effort for this needs to be put in at different phases of the publication process. So not only at the end, but also in the beginning. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Eva. That was wonderful, and a lot of best practices. I'm sure there will be questions. I invite everybody to put their questions in the Q&A box in the toolbar, and then would like to hand over to Laura from Canada.
All right. Thank you for having me. Can you see my slides and not my speaker's notes?
Correct.
Excellent. Okay. I'm happy to follow up on Eva's presentation. It's a little bit of a contrast, I think. But yeah, I just thought I should introduce myself. My name's Laura Brettel from the University of Waterloo in Ontario, Canada. And I'm the Bibliometrics and Research Impact Librarian there. And I'm going to be talking about the use of the ORCID Affiliation Manager specifically, and of course how it relates to persistent identifier best practices for ensuring high quality metadata. So I'm hoping that you gain some practical insights into how we use ORCID and the ORCID Affiliation Manager. But certainly, I just wanted to say that I've done a similar presentation a few times, and it can be quite long. So I've tried to pare this down. So I'm going to feel like I'm missing a lot of details. So I do really encourage you to either reach out to me after this panel session or ask questions during the question and answer period, and hopefully I can provide some more detail. Just a little bit about the University of Waterloo. We are a #1 comprehensive research institute in Canada. What that really means for us is that we have a broad spectrum of research areas, and we don't have a medical school. So that's just one thing that we like to point out at the University of Waterloo, because we do compete for research funding with a lot of much larger institutions, but we still manage to do quite well in rankings across Canada as well as globally. We have a huge focus on entrepreneurship with several incubators, such as our Velocity Center that is focused on connecting students to industry for mentorship and funding so they can develop companies through startups. And we're also a top 100 university worldwide. We have 6 faculties, the Faculty of Arts, Engineering, Environment, Health, Mathematics, and Science. I just provide a little proportion of the number of faculty in each of the different faculties, so the number of faculty members, sorry. And as you can see, we have quite a lot in engineering, arts, science, and math. However, our research focuses are slightly differently proportioned. We're much STEM-focused university, and a lot of our research and research funding goes to those efforts. Okay, so a little bit about the project that I'm going to be talking about. We did a ORCID affiliation manager pilot project during January 2024 to January 2026. It was a funded project where we hired in a person to help implement this project and work solely on this. It was a partnership between the University of Waterloo Libraries as the project owner, our Office of Research, which was our project and grant approval body, as well as a collaboration with our graduate studies and postdoctoral affairs unit, because this really was the participant group that we focused on. We were interested in trying to get our PhD students and postdoctoral researchers using ORCID as sort of like a difficult test group to try to get them using this system. And we're actually going to be implementing to the campus-wide, including all our faculty in the next couple of years. So yeah, the project purpose was really to increase the adoption of a persistent identifier. It was to better understand the contributions and impact of Waterloo researchers, as I said, specifically our graduate students and postdoctoral researchers, and then really understanding more about what a campus-wide implementation actually involves, from workflows and to coordination across campus, for example. Okay, so I'm going to couch this presentation in the following 4 current metadata best practices. So one, using persistent identifiers as a foundation, such as ORCID, which is the focus of our project, that there needs to be a structured and authoritative data source for researcher information and identification. The third being institutions should use centralized and automated workflows. And the fourth being that researchers should maintain control over their metadata. Okay, so just to talk a little bit about PIDs as a foundation, we did this through systematic promotion and implementation of ORCID as a core identifier for researchers, and used as I've mentioned a few times, the ORCID affiliation manager to assert verified institutional affiliations. So the focus of our project was really on the researcher-employer, our educator connection. So this little part of this broader connection here. So we were really just focused on having people sign up for ORCID, and then we could assert their affiliation. So ultimately, that would look like this little green check mark where you have, for example, this postdoctoral researcher from arts, and it's saying that we're asserting their affiliation to the University of Waterloo. That was the main goal. Okay, the second the use of structured and authoritative data sources to integrate data from multiple institutional systems to support metadata workflows. We did this by using data lake requests for postdoc data using our HR system, and then our PhD or data we got from our registrar's office. And then we were able to upload this information into the affiliation manager. And basically, it creates a unique link for each of the researchers that we've uploaded into the system. And that allowed us to email each individual and ask them through like a email for them specifically with their name and that sort of thing. We asked them to connect their or create and connect their ORCID account. And I also just wanted to highlight that we also offered through the person that we hired on contract, Mary Oshana, she was able to meet one-on-one with people if they had concerns, questions, or any other information. And she was able to take this as an opportunity to talk to them about other connections, such as Eva mentioned, connecting their Scopus account if it existed. Okay, at Waterloo, we aren't quite there yet, but we are also moving towards a centralized data model. So really the idea is having a single source of truth. So I appreciated Eva's information about this as well, really about understanding or having sort of a central spot for the researcher information. So we're working on the use of a local API based data exchange. We're integrating ORCIDs with external sources, so such as Scopus and SciVal for publication data. And we're working towards standardized workflows for data capture and validation as well. This is just a little schematic of kind of where we're at in this process. During part of the pilot, we were approached by our faculty of science who is really interested in solving the issue around automation of performance reviews. So instead of having people manually type out their publication information for their CVs and then using that for performance reviews, they wanted to develop an automated system. So we had suggested the use of ORCID. So we have developed a system called ORCID at Waterloo that really connects to the ORCID API, pulls that in locally, and then this information can be fed into other local systems on campus. So sort of the future piloting, we're not quite there yet. They haven't created the automated performance review system or some of these other ones like profiles, faculty profile pages, for example. But ultimately, we have like our website, we have people available to develop these APIs and we're working on it. So we're hoping that in the very near future, we can have the ORCID information ingested into performance review systems, as well as the faculty profile pages in the next few months, actually. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is researcher-controlled metadata, really solidifying that idea that ORCID can be used as a trustworthy, transparent, and allows attribution control from the institution, but ultimately the researcher has full control over allowing that to or maintaining that record connection. Yeah, and I also thought you might be interested in some of our success metrics. As I said, we focused on PhDs and postdocs. We were aiming for about 83%, and we got to 67% of our PhDs and postdocs signing up. This is sort of a breakdown by various faculties, and you can see it depends on their status, PhD or postdoc. It varies a little bit, but we typically had a higher percentage of PhDs signing up and a slightly lower percentage for our postdocs. Yeah, and I also thought it would be important to also share a little bit about, okay, we got them to sign up with ORCID through our email campaigns and various other outreach opportunities, but are their profiles actually getting updated? And the answer is yes, we can see here through this little yellow bar. Basically, they're either manually updating their ORCID records, but more likely because they spent some time connecting to external systems like Scopus, Crossref, etc. Their profiles are getting updated as well with at least publication information. Where this is landing, our big focus really was we were trying to understand our graduate student research impact in relation to our faculty impact. So we're able to create reports such as this. This is just an example of a table from the Faculty of Science showing that our graduate and our PhD students and postdocs are having impact on the research in that faculty. And I just wanted to connect this a little bit to research integrity, since this is sort of the overarching theme of this presentation, and really just emphasizing the importance of high quality metadata that ensures that attributions are correct, there's transparency of contributions, and the information is reproducible. It also needs to scale up, things that we need to do are scale up our PIDs adoption, integrate interoperable infrastructure, maintain researcher control, and of course, coordinate across our institution. Trying to break down those silos, especially in the IT sector where people really like to kind of go off and build their own little systems for their own purposes. We're really trying to make sure that these systems are connected and working together. Right, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Laura. That is wonderful, and really wonderful to see those two approaches and tactics and best practices from Waterloo and Groningen. We're moving over to the Q&A, and I want to invite you all, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A section. While we're getting these organized, I have a question for both of you. You did talk about it, but I think one of the big challenges is the buy-in strategy of the authors and the researchers. And can you just both of you zoom into that point again? So what we know is teams often struggle with the author buy-in. And what are your most effective strategies or hooks you've used to educate campus and get them to do this? Eva?
So what we are doing is really putting emphasis on this during onboarding and in our PhD introduction. So those are the two, I think, main events where you really have the opportunity to have the researcher take out some time to prepare this and to ensure that they already have it registered before they start publishing work. So I think that is a very good point where you can get some good success rates.
Right, good to stress that for people to remember. So the onboarding. And Laura, what is your best practice for getting the buy-in?
Yeah, we discovered that connecting with, especially for the students, their supervisors was sort of a key piece. We really spent a lot of time thinking about this and did sort of like a top-down approach where we connected with some sort of research leadership groups who really encouraged us to reach out to deans and get invited to faculty meetings and then get invited to department meetings, just so we could get people really aware of ORCID across the institution. And then when we were sending these sort of out of the blue emails asking them to click on this suspicious looking link to connect to their ORCID profile, that they had already heard about ORCID from someone somewhere, right? So that was sort of our top-down approach. We are really wanting to get into orientation activities. We've had some issues with that because anyways, long story short, we have some funding challenges at Waterloo where people are having issues like taking on new activities. So like engaging with our orientation folks has been a challenge during this project, but things are starting to ease up a little bit now. So during our second phase where we're implementing across the whole campus, this is certainly going to be a focus for us as well. So it's good to hear that that's been effective for you, Ava.
Yeah, and another thing that I want to add is I already mentioned it during my presentation, but having good support. So making it as easy as possible, ensuring that it's already turned on in these systems so it's easy to connect. That also helps because even if people they have this buy-in and they agree that it is important, if it takes a lot of time and effort for them, they may decide to not do it. So really providing good support for them is also very helpful.
Excellent. I hear the human touch in both your answers. That's really interesting. Then let me ask personally one more question on the technical side and interoperability, because both of you have shown impressive workflows and systems talking to each other. And can you say something about how challenging that has been with non-open APIs and what have you? Or then, of course, the topic of this webinar, best practices. Where is the big win, or where can efficiency really be achieved in times of tight budgets? Laura, do you want to start there?
Sure. Yeah, we've had a huge benefit of being reached out to develop something like this, where we're sort of the key connector with the ORCID system, right? We are a member of ORCID, so we hold all of the key, like literally the keys, the API keys, and so yeah. But the people in our Faculty of Science that have been developing that ingest system have been like very collaborative. We meet like fairly regularly or just chat over Teams when we're trying to make solutions. But working with ORCID to kind of get those permissions was not a challenge, but sort of something we had to talk a lot about. Like, what is it that we can actually do, and what information are we allowed to pull in? What do we have to set in place, like a permissions or data use strategy, that sort of thing. So when we have people log into this local system, it's right there, very similar to ORCID, where they're being told, this is what you're agreeing to, this is our agreement, and this is what we can and can't do with your data.
Thank you, Laura. Before we go to the poll, Paloma and Kimberly, I see you're pulling up a poll, but Eva, can you also say something about interoperability and the more technical side and best practices there?
Yeah, so what I touched upon are the dashboard that we have made, where we combine many different sources. We have used APIs as much as possible, and very often it was already available. We do have the technical people to ensure these pipelines are made. In some cases, this was not already available, and we also spend a lot of time talking to organizations to ask them to either to see what they can improve in terms of what their API offers, or whether they have any other ways of getting this information to us. And what we built was very much user request based. So this is information that people are currently already getting out of all these different systems manually. So we're really saving time across the organization in terms of saving manual work and also improving data quality. So it was therefore easier to get this as a priority and to put time and effort into this, because it helps save time and effort later on.
Excellent. I look at Paloma. And Kimberly, did you want to do the poll now that I just saw it here on the screen?
Should be available for everybody now, right, Kimberly?
Yes, the poll is available for everyone. If you just want to let us know your thoughts after hearing everyone's presentation, poll is open and Q&A is open. Got plenty of time to answer your questions.
Okay, thanks for clarifying, Kimberly. Okay, then let's look at the Q&A in the box. I see there are a couple of questions. I think the first one came in during Eva's presentation, but I do think Laura also mentioned a warehouse. So the question is, what platform or tool do you use to create your data warehouse? Eva, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, so we used the platforms and tools that are already used in our organization for business intelligence. So in our case, that was Azure and Power BI. There are various other tools that you can use for that. Important things you have to consider is that you need, dependent on your needs, but you need to have the ability to keep it automatically updated, because otherwise you have manual work again. You need to have good visualization tools, and it needs to be as intuitive if as possible, so you don't need to spend a lot of time really explaining to people how to use it and how to interpret it. So I think those are the most important considerations, and which specific platform or tool you pick is not the most important part of it, as long as it fits the needs of your users.
That is an incredibly valuable comment, I think, Eva. Can you repeat the last one about the relevance of which choice?
Yeah, and I think what we have seen is that often you spend a lot of time on picking the very specific tool that has the best technical requirements, but you really need to start from the point of view of what your users' requirements are and how you can serve them in the best way, and that should be the most important leading factor into making your choice there.
Excellent. Thank you for repeating that. Laura, do you want to say something about your choice of data warehouse?
Right. So I should clarify that we don't actually have like a research intelligence data warehouse, such as Ava is mentioning. What we have is more of like an institutional data lake that's managed centrally through our IST. So I actually don't know. We are simply a customer of that it's asking for data. So the data that we are getting from that system, we have to fill out a form, and then they tell us whether we can get it sort of regularly or a one-off. And so, yeah, I actually have no idea. On the other end, though, we have like a custom system that's built. Again, the people in the Faculty of Science, I don't know the details of what systems that they're using to sort of ingest that information. But it's pulling ORCID into a central system and connecting that with our institutional ID system. That's as much as I know, actually. Maybe I should know a little bit more about this. But they sort of manage like an FAQ with additional information on how to actually use APIs to pull that into other systems. So you can tell that I'm not like the technical person in this process, but certainly there is systems being used. I can find out and maybe we can share that later.
Thank you, Laura. And if you said IST something department, is that your institutional IT department, maybe?
Yes, that's right. Sorry. Yeah.
No, thanks for clarifying. So you're really an internal customer and they take care of your internal infra.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, there's a question for Eva. You mentioned the FAIR Research Intelligence Dashboard. And is this available online? And I guess they ask for third parties, but can you talk a bit about availability?
No, it's only internally available because it's used for internal decisions. So that is also the level that we have. We only hold information about our own organization, so no information about other universities, for example. We also only share the data with people in a certain role that that needs to either give policy advice or make decisions about research. So it's very specifically catered for these people.
Internal use. Thank you for clarifying. And then there is one specifically, and the person who asked the question also thanks you, Eva. So that's wonderful. In the chat, Laura, Waterloo is doing institutional assertions for education. You mentioned that. The question is that for grad students and undergrads or just for employment for researchers?
So the education information, we're just focusing on PhDs, and simply because they're the most likely folks to have actual research outputs, right, that they would care to include in their ORCIDs. Certainly, we could try to include undergraduates and graduate students through the same mechanisms, but we didn't see it as sort of like as much bang for our buck. In really the intention was to help us identify and connect research with students by understanding who they are. We had done a previous project where we tried to identify graduate students, and because their names, there's so many more of them, and their names can be very difficult to identify on the actual papers themselves. We thought this was worth at least focusing on the PhD students.
Excellent. Thanks for clarifying, Laura. Then I understand a few questions came in through the poll, I think for both of you, Laura and Eva, understanding who will or should be responsible for creating a policy to maintain metadata in the university. Who's responsible for the policy? Eva?
Yeah, who will be responsible for creating the policy? I think it's very much a shared effort to determine the policy. Yeah, that is a good. I don't have a specific answer to that. I think it
Fine.
depends where, like, if it's about metadata in how it's registered in a specific system, or what the guidelines are for attaching metadata to publication, because those may also be slightly different needs that you have for that. Like I said, we always work within a network, so conversations like that are also very often shared between universities. Yeah, so I want to say yeah, shared responsibility.
And it depends, right? You mentioned different policies and therefore
Yeah,
maybe situational different settings shared.
yeah.
Responsibilities. Laura, what is your answer to
Yeah,
who's
I have to
responsible for policy?
agree. We've had a lot of success with collaborating with our Office of Research on similar types of policies, certainly because they're often connected to, um, external grant funding, that sort of thing. Like I'm thinking our research data management policies that have come down from our tri-agencies in Canada. Those are our major granting organizations where they have sort of a national level policy that then they are requiring us to do local level policies, and that has developed through collaborations with the other offices that care about such things, such as our Office of Research. So I can imagine that if we had an institutional metadata policy, that would have to be in collaboration, but we don't currently. I'd say that this is certainly an area where I think libraries can play a significant leading role in that. And I think we already do because we understand, especially on the research side of things, what metadata is and what persistent identifiers are and why they're important.
Excellent. Thank you. An important role for the libraries. Now, a rather technical question, possibly. Fitting new metadata into an already established schema. Do you have experience with that and any best practices? Eva?
Yeah, so an example that I'm thinking of is, well, new metadata in a schema. And very often, if we want to add new metadata, we already can fit it within a schema, but it's an additional. So, for example, identifiers. Often we have multiple identifiers, and our system allows for multiple of those to be added. So then it's often a question of having a process documented on how we want to do it. So what do we agree on, what the most important identifier is, for example, that we are using as a guiding principle. Yeah, I'm not sure whether I can think of an example where we want to add completely new metadata. I don't know whether Laura maybe has an example.
I know I don't have anything else to say.
Right. Well, that's great. Are there any further questions? We have 8 minutes, maybe from the ORCID team, Paloma or Shiv.
Well, I actually don't have any further addition, but maybe just a reflection on what is important to consider when introducing ORCIDs into a new system. And it is basically a focus that we always mention around authentication. So the importance of getting that authenticated ID added to the system with the corresponding permissions whenever needed. Laura, for example, was presenting the usage of the affiliation manager that's connected already with the authentication. In the case of EFA, the CRIS system allows also the collection of authenticated ORCID IDs, and this is an important part whenever we think of introducing ORCID IDs to a new system, and most importantly, pass those ORCID IDs downstream to other systems.
Thank you, Paloma. Shiv, do you have anything?
None from me at the moment, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, there is a question. If the two presenters use OA switchboard, I want to invite all of you to another webinar in a couple of weeks' time when we're also talking about best practices. You will see Groningen and Waterloo are on our list of participants, but I had the same question, how in the greater scheme of things they're using that. So I think today's about ORCID. Next month is another webinar where we will further address this, or we take that offline. Because there's another question, from a practical perspective, how can institutions leverage tools like ORCID Affiliation Manager to scale up ORCID adoption and improve the quality and reliability of affiliation information? For Eva and Laura.
I can maybe speak to that. The success that we've had at Waterloo has been really due to our ability to acquire a grant for a specialized project. So we had a dedicated person that was focused solely on implementing ORCID. Now, not all institutions are going to have this opportunity, but I think there does need to be some dedicated attention to sort of getting through that large threshold of adoption. So as I think it was over 2,000 some students that we have now and postdocs signed up with ORCID. So moving forward, that number is going to be a lot more manageable, maybe not for someone doing it full time. So I think that simply the biggest challenge would be identifying how you're going to actually sustain or implement something, who's going to do it, how much time it's going to take, and then how, and we're still working on this, how we're going to sustain that into the future.
Thank you, Laura. Eva?
I'm not sure whether I really have anything to add here. No, what I do want to add is that, for example, the fact that we have ORCID connected to our CRIS, if publications are connected or are sent to ORCID through that connection, it also shows the provenance, and that shows the trustworthiness of this connection. So the fact that the affiliation is verified and also shows provenance also improves the reliability of this information. So that is something that also helps adoption.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're getting up to the hour. I would like to ask Kimberly or Paloma, if not done yet, to repeat the link to the video animation in the chat. And I'm building on Eva's, one of your last words about all the components are there, and it's about making it all work and making it all, use it the way it is, the building blocks of research. Thank you for doing that, connecting the building blocks of research and all these persistent identifiers Some have been around for 20 years, and what we're sharing with Crossref and ORCID and ROAR in that video animation is that actually everything is already there and everybody has a role to play. And I think Eva and Laura did a great job today in showing how that is done, best practices in practice. And thanks to ORCID for organizing this webinar, how this impacts and why this is also relevant for the important topic of research integrity. So thank you to the speakers and the audience. And I think I leave the last word to Paloma.
Yes, thank you very much for participating. Of course, Laura and Eva, and of course, Yvonne for sharing these sessions and organizing or co-organizing with us. I've shared in the chat also some case studies of the affiliation manager we did 3 years ago, in case those are useful for the question that was asked in the Q&A. And we will share the recording and the materials of this presentation after approximately a couple of days. And thank you very much again for your time, and hope this session was helpful and brought some ideas about metadata management and quality. Goodbye,
Wonderful.
everybody.
Thanks, everybody.